Professor Brown, it's great to have you here, and we're all very excited about this webinar series on Howard Thurman. It's the first one that in SDI's history on Dr. Thurman, and so we're thrilled. All of us are looking forward to what you have to say. And I wanted to start with asking you, why do you think Dr. Thurman is so perennially relevant, not just in the 20th century when he had this huge impact on a number of really seminal figures, particularly in the civil rights movement, but also, theologically speaking. But why is he perennially relevant and particularly relevant in the 21st century?
So Dr. Howard Thurman was it's one of those special people who seemed to be able to pull together social issues with the sacred. And often he is described as offering living wisdom. That is wisdom that continues to feed us today, even though it's probably more than 40 years after his death. He was just an amazing, young, brilliant student coming along, as well as someone who was curious and observant, extremely observant. And he had mystical experiences as a child, sensing that transcendent presence of God. So once he discovered that there was some kind of interrelatedness of everything, it really spurred him to begin to question why we had these artificial barriers, say, for example, in religions or in churches or in even the social life of people. He was also particularly interested in helping people understand and discover their own personal worth as a child of God, and to not depend upon one's circumstances as an indicator of who they are. Mm-hmm. So with that, I think his relevancy continues because he was able to combine the sacred, inviting in the spirit, and seeing that what was most important is that we discover who we are as children of God, as well as removing what he considered to be artificial barriers to the oneness that God created. And he felt that any kind of spiritual practice or discipline or in the development of one's spirituality should be linked to restoring God's beloved creation. And so I consider him to be a sacred activist, one who has invited the spirit into his work.
Thank you. Thank you. As a community of spiritual directors and companions, Dr. Thurman presents a really interesting and compelling model in many different ways, not just because he was a teacher, obviously, but a mentor and guide to so many people in his life, as I've discovered. And I wonder if you want to say a few words about Dr. Thurman as a spiritual director and spiritual companion.
Yes. So I'm not sure if he would describe himself as a spiritual director or companion, but he felt that his calling was in the area of working with individuals and groups in some cases on truly finding out what their individual sacred calls were and helping them to begin to realize that call. He was highly criticized for not marching, for not participating more actively in the civil rights movement. And he said over and over again that he felt that that was not his calling, that his calling was to create the spiritual sanctuary for those who were feeling called to the streets or to wherever else they might be called. And he was very much interested in helping people understand what their purpose was for participating in any kind of movement or activity. So he would, ask people like Jesse Jackson or Bayard Rustin, who are you really? Or what do you want? Why are you doing this? So that he could actually extract from them the deeper meanings and purposes for their lives, as opposed to, oh, there's something going on out here, so I'm going to just go get in it, right? It's very, very concerned about each person understanding what their sacred call was, because as far as he was concerned, racial reconciliation was certainly an important aspect in restoring dignity to his own people. But he felt that unless we had some coming together, we were not going to ever be at union with the divine presence. Yeah. So it was really important for him to work with those who came to him for quiet counsel. And he felt that was naturally something that he was gifted with, and felt it was very important.
Yeah, and that actually, one of the many compelling things about Dr. Thurman is his emphasis on mysticism, right? And I think actually that ties to your answer just now about, some people are called to the streets and to demonstrate, and there's great value in it, and others are called to be more quiet and reflective and immersive. And so I wonder if you can share just a few words. I know you'll be talking about this more during this webinar series, about Dr. Thurman's take on mysticism.
So, yes, but before I give that explanation, I just want to remind people that not everybody that was involved in the civil rights movement or any major social movement is in the street. You've got people taking care of children, you've got people cooking, you've got lawyers behind the scene, getting people out of jail or filing briefs, etc. And sometimes you have writers and actors, playwrights, people that are all feeling called to discuss this issue, but in different sorts of ways. Mm-hmm. So, social movements aren't just about demonstrating. I mean, that's not the only role that people can play. So Thurman, as I mentioned earlier, was having these mystical experiences outside. And, he discovers a book written by Rufus Jones, a great Quaker mystic, called Finding the Trail of Life, where he describes, this is Jones, his mystical experiences as a young child outside. And so Thurman, decided that he had to study with this man. And so he spent a semester with Rufus Jones, but as he came away from that experience, he realized that there needed to be, I think, some greater expansion or exploration into mysticism. First, he discovered that the word really often elicits, particularly among the Black religious community, feelings of trepidation and fear, and maybe it's, the devil, all of those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And so he spent some time trying to come up with different terms for mysticism, like a creative encounter or a religious experience. But he found that what was even more important was when he began to write about mysticism and social change. Like, why was mysticism important for social change? And I think he was, in part, speaking to the generations that would follow him who, you know, are now a bit freer to talk about mystical experiences. But he felt like when, you know, there's different kinds of mysticism, and for some, when they go down into, you know, the oneness that we belong to, they come up, you know, inside of a larger wholeness, and so that part of that mystical experience requires one to move beyond their own personal issues to thinking more broadly about, you know, other people and other situations other than their own. So he felt like when we have a creative experience that it begins to, or creative encounter, it begins to change us, so that we're not so self-focused or self-absorbed. And we, you know, feel stirred to go out and to do something that is going to move us closer to that oneness with God.
Well, thank you. I could ask you 20 more questions, but I think I'll wait for the course to begin tomorrow, and we're very grateful that you'll be joining us. Did you want to add anything else, Professor Brown, or?
I'm looking forward to it. I think that particularly the issue of listening for the sound of the genuine is sort of at the core of what he has to say to us 40 years later, which is that, you know, who are you listening to? What is it that's moving you? Do you have control of your inner life, or does somebody else? So he really felt like getting a sense of who you are was vital to the rest of your life and the other things that you might be called to do. So I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to meeting all these wonderful people who are going to join us on this walk with Thurman.